So you're in a relationship. There's been some red flags. Less than perfect. Many issues. Lots of adversity and lots of problems along the way. It's interesting how you keep going back. You have many conversations with your girlfriends or your guy friends talking about the problems in the relationship, but yet things don't seem to get better. But you keep going back. You've even categorized this relationship as being bad, red flaggy, problematic. The list goes on. But you keep going back. Okay, I'm going to offer some answers in this video. Because if the relationship's that bad, why are you still going back with them? That's a good question, right? And I have the answers. Hey friends, I'm glad to be back. And today we're going to talk about relationships. And I'm going to address a specific question and offer specific answers. If they're that bad, why are you still with them? If the relationship is that traumatic, that problematic, that many red flags, a trying situation that really tries your nerves, why are you still with them? It's a good question. And on today's video, I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so let's jump in right now because there's no point in waiting. You know, the first reason we stay in these relationships is because we don't want to be alone. You know how many people in the world don't want to be alone and they would rather sleep with the enemy because they don't want to be alone? Too scared to sail or swim those charted waters. It's really amazing how we'll do anything to not be alone. We'd rather be in a bad relationship. We'd actually rather be with a vampire than be by ourselves because at least we know there's somebody there. And I find it very interesting because I think this is a learned response, but I also think it's the fact that we don't really get to know who we are. Who are we? And what do we stand for? And we don't really think about the relationship with ourselves. The relationship with ourselves is one of the few things in this planet that nobody really talks about. We talk about therapy and going to therapy and going to a life coach to figure out our relationships, or figure out our problems at work, our career problems, our career path, you know, to figure out the things that we've dealt with since childhood. But isn't it interesting how we don't really go and figure out about ourselves? Because we don't put enough energy into ourselves. We'd rather put energy into a relationship, well, quite honestly, it's a dead end. We'd rather do that than put the work into ourselves because, well, I think there's fear, but I actually think most of us don't realize the value of who we are. Like, we're valuable, but I think many of us don't realize that, and that's why we find ourselves in, well, not so good relationships. The second reason is that we rely on other people for our identity, and we rely on other people for our approval. A lot of people consider that codependency. And oftentimes in relationships, when we're in relationships that aren't healthy, we become very codependent. But it's not because that one person is unhealthy and you're the healthiest person. It's because both of you are unhealthy in the situation because neither one of you have actually gotten to know who either one of you is. And what I mean by that is that when you go into a healthy relationship, it means that each person has worked on themselves individually. They understand exactly what makes them tick. They understand their honesty, their compassion, and they've also figured out how to love themselves unconditionally, okay? And so when you're in a relationship with two people like that, it's very powerful, and it's a very independent type thing where two people come together and have like a family dynamic. But in the codependent relationship, it's very unhealthy, and we have a tendency of dragging each other down and holding each other back, when in reality, both people need to move on and grow and learn in an environment where it's by themselves, independently, to thrive in order to understand who they are instead of trying to figure out who someone else is in the relationship. It's not about who they are, it's about who you are, to understand how to better yourself, how to understand yourself, and then eventually how to get into a healthy relationship and give the best of yourself to that person. The third reason we get in these relationships and we find ourselves there and we're still in them is because we don't know ourselves. We just don't. We haven't spent the time to get to know ourselves. And I know you're like, well, how do I get to know myself, Ashley? What do I need to do? Well, the first thing you want to sit back at is begin to understand what makes you tick. What do you love? What are you passionate about? what do you stand for? Okay. Can you be independent? How can you stand on your own? And this begins by creating fundamental boundaries in all of your relationships to give yourself not only the room that you need to grow and to learn, but also the room you need to have other people respect you as you're respecting yourself. It's very interesting nowadays. I find that most people are in these relationships and they find the mistrust or the dishonesty, or they have the problem respecting the other person. But the point is that when they look back at themselves, they have a challenge respecting themselves. Most people to some degree are mirroring us. Oftentimes in a mirroring perspective, it's more like a funhouse mirror because they seem so wrong and we seem slightly wrong. But is that the truth? It's very interesting because what I found is the more off or negative or unhealthy relationship we're in is based on the fact that, one, we certainly don't respect ourselves. We haven't found that self-love yet. We found what we think is love, but it's all conditional. And we seem to think what we want, whether it's a carbon copy of how we were raised or a carbon copy of a previous relationship, without realizing what we need, but better yet, who we are, to be that outside persona and the inside persona to bring to us that same energy, which is uplifting and respectful instead of the opposite. The next reason why you're still in that relationship is because of low self-esteem. Okay? Many of us suffer from low self-esteem. What does low self-esteem do to us? Low self-esteem makes us lower or feel lower about our self-worth. We don't feel good enough. We feel like everybody else is better than us. We feel as though we're lucky to be in a relationship. If anybody will take us, thank God this person will actually love us, whatever that love is, no matter how conditional it is, you'd rather take that than the opposite. And that's why we end up in these bad relationships. And it's not the relationship that's necessarily bad. Remember that. It's not like, oh, this relationship is just tainted. It's horrible. It's that both people in the relationship are probably both suffering from low self-esteem, and that is not a good thing. So how do you get out of the low self-esteem? Where you got to functionally understand who you are. You've got to figure out what you excel at. You've got to accept the things that you are challenged at. And again, you have to look at yourself as the individual entity that's powerful, strong, and see those things about yourself that other people see about you. Begin to understand your value and worth. And some of that can be hard because many of us were raised in situations where the family looked down at you. The parents picked on you. Maybe you had an older brother, older sister that picked on you too. Maybe you were made fun of at school, and all that impacted your low self-esteem. And now it's time to really sit back and look at yourself and say, hey, I'm not going to live my life this anymore. Okay? I'm going to make some essential changes. How do I begin? It's about putting my best foot forward and realizing that I'm better than that whole past, but I just have to see it. Because if I begin to see it and believe it, then other people will believe it too. And remember, settling in a negative relationship or an abusive relationship or a relationship with red flags all over it is not going to add to your self-esteem. It's actually going to put you down even farther. It's not about sacrificing. It's about finding who you are and actually taking the time out to figure that out will actually increase your self-esteem, because you as an individual will realize that you're actually paying attention to yourself, which will actually build your self-esteem up as well, but it'll also make you feel better, and you'll also learn more about yourself, and you'll actually have better intent and understanding on who you'll get into a relationship with and who you won't. The next reason you find yourself in this type of relationship is because you don't have real self-love. Now, I'm not talking about egotistical love or, oh, I love myself, I'm so great. Not that. I'm talking about real unconditional love where I actually care about myself and I care about my well-being. I care about what I'm around and I care about what I'm exposed to. I actually care about my body, I care about my heart, I care about my mind, I care about my soul, and I actually hold myself up in a high regard, and not in some sort of selfish or egotistical regard. I hold myself up in the fact that I respect my body, I respect myself, and I want the best for myself. And I think that to me, and I can go into more and more on unconditional love, we could do countless videos on what that really means, every aspect of that, and I plan on doing it. But it means like really caring enough about yourself to not put yourself in negative, like compromising situations and relationships. You know how when you're in a situation and it's compromising and it's like just icky and you feel really gross that you were even there? It's because you're having this battle, okay? Because you know you're better than that and you know you have more value than that, but you're still putting yourself in that situation. It's an internal fight battle. You see what I'm saying? You still put yourself in a negative situation, maybe an abusive situation, but yet you know you're better than that. So that's what gives you that stomach where you feel all like knotted up. You feel all stressed out maybe when you're going back into the relationship. Perhaps you had a lunch with your girlfriends and then next thing you know you're going back to see your boyfriend and all of a sudden you get those knots and you're getting kind of ill and you're getting a little stressed out. That's because you know this isn't right for you. But you haven't figured out exactly how to get out of it and you haven't figured out how to find that self-love to end that cycle of putting yourself down and committing your life to that situation. The next reason is that we really don't know what unconditional love is. And I was just talking about self-love, but self-love and unconditional love are the same things because in order to really love ourselves, we have to unconditionally love ourselves, right? It's not that egotistical type love. But also, in order to love someone else, we have to unconditionally love them, okay? But what does that mean? Okay, so unconditional love is the opposite of conditional love, which means that conditionally, I will love you if you do this. I will love you if you do that. If you don't do that, I'm not going to love you. If you don't do that, I'm not going to call you. If you do that, I'm not going to call you. I'm not going to text you. I'm going to block you. All those things are not unconditional love. That's all based on condition. And condition-based love is not a real love. Okay, that's you do one thing, I'll give you this type of attention perhaps, but the person that's giving that conditional love doesn't even know what love is. And the person accepting that as love doesn't know what love is. Okay, so what is unconditional love? Unconditional love means loving that person. You don't have to respect them, but loving that person for who they are, for the being that they are, okay? Now, to understand that, sometimes we misconstrue loving somebody like that and staying in a relationship. I think that oftentimes we feel like we can only love one person on this planet, which is asinine, okay? You can unconditionally love as many people as you want to, and I think that's awesome. We're not talking about sex and love. We're talking about love. Love is not an action. Right? So it's very different. Sex is an action. Lust is kind of an action in itself based on something maybe not very real, more like a spell of some sort. And so unconditional love itself is understanding how to love oneself internally on the value of the self, to understand the value of self, but also to go a step further and to realize from whence somebody came from, okay? From where you came from. You know, many of you out there believe in a God, whether that's a Buddhist or Christian or whatever religion that is, or maybe it's based on spirituality and not a religion. But if you to understand your connectivity with that, you would understand that if you are connected to that, then how could you not love yourself and how could you not unconditionally love yourself if you're connected to the one? Does that make sense? Because the thing is that when we finally realize who we are and what we're here on this planet to do, the fact that we hold love back from ourselves, that's crazy. The fact that we don't find unconditional love for other people, that's hard too. But the thing is that unconditional love has to start with you. It can't start outside of you. I can't unconditionally love you if I don't know how to love myself. You see what I'm saying? I can't do for you what I can't do for me. It doesn't happen that way. And that's why you'll meet people on your way that really understand you and really gets you. And they're in that moment like you are. And they're feeling those same emotions and those same feelings. And they're in that same self-love and that same unconditional love. Whereas you're going to run into people that you can still unconditionally love, and you should, who might be spiritually or religiously or in that moment or in that thought process of love 10 to 15 years behind you. Everybody's in their own moment of time. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's like you can't expect somebody to be in the exact same moment as you are, to be living that and to understand that, But again, remember, that's okay, but you don't have to, you don't have to live with them. They don't have to be your girlfriend or boyfriend. You can care about somebody, but you don't have to live with them. And I think once you realize that unconditional love is the basis for everything, and you understand that you got to figure that out first before you even worry about unconditionally loving other people, and you got to figure that out before even worrying about what's wrong with the other person in the relationship, because inherently, without figuring that out, then what do you have? Everything's based on conditions and on expectations, and all that goes away. The next reason why you're in this relationship is because you haven't done the self-work. Okay, I'm not trying to be difficult, and I'm definitely not trying to be hard on you. But just like anything else in life, we got to do the work. Remember going to school and we had to study? And we studied because we had to take some tests, right? And so we had to do that, and then in order to pass or get a good grade, we had to study, and so we had to do the work. And we had to do the work on whatever subject that was. Okay, the subject I'm talking about now is you. And most people gloss over this subject almost all the time. Because people look outside of themselves for value, and they look to relationships to define themselves and their value. So if that guy loves me, then I'm awesome. If he thinks I'm cute, oh my God, this is so great. I feel so good because he thinks I'm hot and he calls me and he's talking to me. Oh my God, she thinks I'm hot. So, the whole whatever that is, guys, girls, everything, thinking about what somebody else thinks about them defines their value, which isn't right. It doesn't make any sense, because in the end, all you have is you. We came in this lifetime on our own, and we're leaving on our own. And so if you understand the value of that, you understand that you have you. You have you to create and understand and see your magnificence, or you can choose to not work on yourself, not see your magnificence, and in the end, have a ton of regret because you realize that you judged yourself. And many of times, more than not, you put yourself down because somebody didn't like you, because somebody didn't love you. But it had nothing to do about them. You gave them power that they never deserved. The power is within you. So once you pull that power away from them and you realize it's not about him liking you, and for you girls out there, it's not about him liking you, for you guys, whatever, it's about you loving you. All of a sudden, the power goes to you. And then you begin to realize your personal power, the energy that you have, the value that you have, and you start understanding the coolness of you and all this amazing stuff that you go, wow, I didn't even think that I was this cool. I mean, I just thought of myself as this gangly kid that didn't have really good this or couldn't do that great of math or whatever. And you begin to realize how great you are. And not in an egotistical way, but you begin to embrace yourself and you realize, you know what? Whoever gets in a relationship with me eventually is going to be pretty lucky. And you know what's really cool about that is if you get into a relationship, if you've done the self-work with somebody else that's done the self-work on their own, it's a very powerful duo. It's powerful because you're not looking at them to have them define you and to give you value. And they're not looking at you to define them and give them value. Do you see what I'm saying? You've already found your value. You've already found it. You're not giving away your power. They're not giving away their power. And so when you realize that, understanding the power of doing that self-work and understanding self is the key to one's happiness. And it keeps us out of these relationships that are, manipulative, maybe quite abusive, but is it really only the other person? Because it really does take two to tango. Because if you don't accept the manipulation, are they going to keep dishing it out? Probably not. If you don't accept the relationship and you know that you can do more and you can learn about yourself more and then get back into the dating game later once you've figured it out, that's pretty powerful stuff. But then the relationship falls apart and you move on and figure out who you are. Powerful position to be in. The last reason, but definitely not least reason, for why we find ourselves in these relationships, I think it begins with a good example first, and then I can explain it. Have you ever been starving, and you go over to a friend's house, and they got nothing? They got no food. They have nothing to eat. And you're just like, you got to be kidding me. Have you ever been in that situation? Well, have you ever been in a relationship where you're starving for love and you're looking to someone else that has no idea what love is and they're starving for love too and you're looking to get love from them, but their pantries of love are empty? Interesting, isn't it? So why do we get into relationships with other people that don't know what love is and then we expect them to love us? Doesn't that sound wild and crazy? But do you think this is probably hitting the nail on the head right now? Seriously, you say, why can't they love me right? Why can't they show me the respect? Why can't they do this? Why can't they treat me like this? Why can't they do this for me? Okay, step back a moment. When was the last time they did any of that for themselves? And when was the last time you did any of that for yourself? And then you wonder why this relationship isn't working. Two starving people are never going to get full. Two starving people are always going to starve. And if you're looking for that starving person to feed you, you're looking in the wrong place. Remember, you have to feed yourself. You've got to go find the food for thought and the food to really feast your mind, heart, soul, and body in. And that begins with what? Figuring out your blueprint. Figuring out your blueprint like an architect. Think about it. Looking internally inside of yourself, figuring out what makes you tick, figuring out what connects you, figuring out what your connection is on this planet, figuring out the values that you embody, figuring out what you want to do here, figuring out your purpose, figuring out your self-love, and then big time, figuring out how to help other people. Because when we help other people, not only does it empower us, but it strengthens us. We also get outside of self for a little while, right? Not always thinking about what we do have or what we don't have, mostly what we don't have. And that's what's so good about getting out of that self-thought process and actually doing something with the gifts that we've been given. When we actually have self-love, we actually respect the gifts that we've been given and we actually use them to the best of our ability. Instead of just like, throwing them under the rug and not thinking about them. Because when you don't use something, you can't strengthen it. When you don't use something, you can't expect to get more things when you're not taking advantage of the things you already have. Okay? So that's why you're probably in this relationship. And think about it. It doesn't make you a bad person. Okay? Not at all. It makes you a normal person. But these are the things that I want you to think about. Because these are empowering thoughts. These are thoughts that will change your life. These are empowering thoughts that will make you the solid individual, the entire person, the whole person, different from the half, that you can begin to understand, contemplate, because the thing is, oftentimes we want to learn about all these other people. We go on dates and we want to learn everything about them. How often have you learned about yourself? We know more about somebody that you dated for a month than you know about yourself. You probably know more about somebody you dated for 2 weeks than you know about yourself. Isn't it time to get to know you? Isn't it time to figure out who you are? Because until you figure out who you are, it'll just be a string of bad relationships. Because we can't get in the right relationship until we know what we stand for. And we can't get into the right relationship until we know who we are. Okay? Because we have to right the wrongs of our own personal relationship to actually get into another relationship with somebody else that actually understands it as well. Okay? So it's not a personal thing. This is a powerful thing. And if you understand the power that this resonates with, you can go on and after this video, maybe starting a journal of your own to begin to ask yourself those serious questions. Who am I? What do I love about myself? What are characteristics about myself that I feel are very empowering? What are some things that I want to work on? What are some things that I've done with myself to really understand? Have I done anything that really helps me as far as like playing music or painting or maybe taking hikes or walks that really empower me to understand who I am? What if I like to write poetry or I like to read and that's my self-expression? How much have I connected with that self-expression, or have I just haven't had time? So in the comments section below, well, first off, before you comment, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Also in the comments below, I'm interested in the relationship situations that you've gone through, but more importantly, have you awoken to the fact that you need to learn more about yourself? And when did that awakening happen? Did it happen recently? Did it happen 20 years ago? And when you had that self-epiphany, what changed in your life? What was that impact? And what did you do from that point forward? I find it's very empowering to hear other people's empowering stories. And I think it's very important for folks in this community, on this YouTube channel, to be able to talk freely and clearly. But better yet, to realize it's not about other people, and it's not about really placing blame. It's about recognizing the power we have within. And then at that point, we realize we co-create everything in our life. So why don't we co-create a really great relationship with ourselves? And later on, a really great relationship with someone else that we understand and that understands us. I hope this video has helped you. Please share it with your friends, family, relatives, and anybody you care about that might be in a struggling relationship. Share it with them because they would share it with you. Help them in their life. And also take some of this to heart as well, because I'm sure even if you're not in a bad relationship, this stuff still applies. Take care. Have a wonderful day. And don't forget, I say it every time, but I mean it. Don't forget to live your true life, not other people's life. What's true to you in your heart. Live that. Are you currently in a toxic relationship and unsure what the next day will bring? Have you often wondered if there's more to life than this? Do you suffer from self-esteem issues that you've had since you were a young child? Have issues or have difficulty speaking with your family? Do you feel surrounded by self-centered people? Seems as though you're always giving and they're always taking. If you've answered yes to any of these questions, you need some answers. The 10-day challenge to live your true life gives you the knowledge and techniques for creating boundaries in your life that help us to deal with family, as well as dealing with those narcissistic and toxic people in your life. It offers the insight into understanding and overcoming your self-esteem issues, and to begin to see for the first time your amazing value. You owe it to yourself to find the power within you.